Before this video begins, I would like to give a quick thank you to my Asbantium level patrons Fallon Cortez and Nathan Gibson. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. How would you like to live forever? It's a question that has been posed and explored in media for centuries. From the Epic of Gilgamesh to the picture of Dorian Gray, the cursed chalice of immortality has been a fixture of media, and Doctor Who is no stranger to the concept, especially because the main character themselves can be considered as somewhat immortal. However, despite this, Doctor Who had rarely settled down for a proper extended exploration of immortality until 2015's The Woman Who Lived, which is a sequel of sorts to The Girl Who Died, a story granting side character Ashildr the ability of immortality. The Woman Who Lived sees the Doctor catch up with Ashildr centuries later, but does it succeed in exploring these themes? Is it a good episode, or does it fall flat just like its predecessor? Well, as always, that's what I'm here to find out. So grab your closest alien pendant thing and get ready, because it's time to take a deep dive into The Woman Who Lived. The episode, I mean.
This is banter. I'm against banter. I'm on record on the subject of banter.
When it came to this story, Moffat turned to Catherine Tregenna, who had previously written 4 very solid episodes for Torchwood, 2 of which were my absolute favourites out of the show's first 2 series. I appreciate how Tregenna was granted a lot of freedom with her story here, especially when it came to the 17th century setting, which is immediately established well with a scene of Ashildr robbing Lucy Fanshawe, who, seems weirdly into the whole thing.
What else would you take from me, sir?
Are we definitely sure Moffat didn't write this? Despite those strange overtones, I like how the opening establishes this setting with the dark forest road, the backdrop of this robbery, using all the kinds of iconography and catchphrases you associate with the lawless years after the English Civil War. I would admit that the driver's exposition of the nightmare is a little bit heavy-handed, but it's a great scene to introduce the moving parts of the story, like Ashildr, the amulet, and the mysterious creature she works with. It's also got some fun comedy with 12, who comes blundering in to ruin the heist thanks to his gizmo thing.
Sorry, were you talking to me there?
Capaldi is brilliant for these kinds of comedic scenes, 12 not even realising what he's doing and not having Clara around to tether him to humanity, so he bumbles around in his own little world, allowing the carriage to escape. However, we do also get to see Capaldi's more grounded and dramatic skills as 12 realises the nightmare is Ashildr herself. I love the slow turn he does when he recognises her voice, how it dawns on him that he's now facing the consequences of his own actions in that previous episode. It's all purely non-verbal facial acting and Capaldi absolutely kills it, selling the Doctor's shock at seeing Ashildr again. So this whole cold open is a stellar way of setting up the narrative to come without ever feeling too bloated or too rushed. It achieves its goal perfectly. Although, it's a shame I can't really say the same about the rest of the episode. Tregenna's Torchwood stories were absolutely fantastic human narratives. She perfectly used the sci-fi nature of the episodes to explore real human experiences and human emotions. She took us on journeys exploring identity and inevitability, the power of memories, humanity's callous greed, and, well, Out of Time speaks for itself. Tregenna was by far the perfect candidate to explore the far-reaching effects of Ashildr's immortality because of her experience with those kinds of emotions and topics. Right from the start, we get that fantastic gut punch as Ashildr realises the Doctor is just here by coincidence. He hasn't come to take her away from this depressing slow road into the future she wants to explore.
You haven't come for me.
No, it was just a coincidence.
This idea was one of the few things Moffat expressly wanted in this episode, because he wanted the story to contrast the Doctor with an ancient being who still had to live each day at a time, rather than being able to step through time at will, having almost complete control over their experience of history. I really like this comparison. It's similar to how Captain Jack, a former time agent, was forced to stay on Earth for over a century while waiting to meet the Doctor again. It's all well and good becoming immortal and, being able to live forever. That's an ability you can't really take advantage of when you're surrounded by primitive technology, having to wait thousands and thousands of years to actually explore the planet or the stars because the human race hasn't developed enough yet. This initial reunion also introduces the idea of Ashildr no longer remembering her original name or her origins. This was actually partly due to Tregenna developing her story around the same time that Jamie Matheson was writing his own episode, so she only knew the basic outline of the Girl Who Died and figured the newly immortal character would probably have forgotten her origins anyway. I do personally hate the whole "my name is me" thing, partly because, it just makes her a nightmare to talk about, so obviously I'm just going to stick with calling her Ashildr. The concept in general is nice, a character so old they don't even bother with a name anymore, but the particular use of me just rubs me the wrong way, and feels like one of those annoying Moffat era cutesy poetic things.
I call myself me. All the other names I chose died with whoever knew me.
I guess it would have been a bit easier to warm to if Maisie Williams was actually a more well-rounded and dynamic actor. Like I mentioned in the previous video, I feel like she's a very wooden and emotionless performer, so it kind of hampers her big speech about being singular and alone because, you know, it feels so stunted and like she's reading from her script, which is kind of stinky to me. She doesn't have the range required for a character like this. If you want to show how a character has grown emotionless, you kind of have to cast an actor who can show that emotion to begin with. When crafting The Woman Who Lived, Tregenna was inspired by tales of thieves and highwaymen throughout history, specifically the legend of Lady Catherine Ferrers, the so-called Wicked Lady who was a supposed highwayman until she died in 1660. Ferrers was an heiress to a vast fortune and estates at a very young age, however her family were staunch royalists. So when the English Civil War broke out, the 14-year-old Catherine lost all of her inherited assets and then eventually died childless at the age of just 26. However, legends say that Catherine had turned to highway robbery in an attempt to combat her dwindling fortune, a practice pretty common for royalist supporters who had just lost all their lands and money. The inspirations in this episode are very clear, especially considering Ashildr masquerades as an honourable lady residing in this great, lavish manor, just like the legendary Wicked Lady, who supposedly resided in Markgate Cell in Hertfordshire. I do like this double life aspect for Ashildr. Someone who has lived for so long is undoubtedly going to have amassed some sort of fortune and can live in luxury, but she still wants that sense of adventure, which she can achieve with her robberies. After all, she'd only be sitting around having banquets and tea parties otherwise. Not exactly the best use of an infinite lifespan, is it? Ashildr's lust for adventure is further established in a montage of her escapades throughout her 800 years since we last saw her. From being a medieval queen to being trialed as a witch, we really get to understand her slow path throughout history, seeing how she was part of all major Anglo-centric events and couldn't really do anything about it because she had no way out. Like the Doctor alludes to at the beginning, he has checked in on Ashildr every now and then, lurking from a distance just to watch. This was shown explicitly in a deleted scene as the Doctor visited a mourning Ashildr during the Black Death, posing as a witch doctor so she doesn't recognise him. It makes a lot of sense that he would constantly keep a track of her to see how she's doing. And I'm not gonna lie, I actually prefer the montage in this deleted scene over the quirky version in the finished episode. It's a better way of showing Ashildr's tragically long life, especially because of the emotional score by Murray Gold, you know, matching that end of The Girl Who Died. But instead, you know, we get Ashildr outright telling us what happened in each clip, rather than it just being a striking visual as the Doctor reads her diaries and experiences her journey through her eyes, rather than pure exposition. It's a shame that this deleted scene wasn't included. It really is better than what we did get, despite, you know, how good the original montage still is. I really like the idea of Ashildr's diaries being her only connection to her many years as an immortal. Unlike Captain Jack, Ashildr's immortality is more limited. She still has a human brain, and she's essentially frozen in place as the person she was in The Girl Who Died. Captain Jack's immortality is all mixed up with time itself, you know, it's a fixed point in time, so he's still able to perfectly remember all his experiences. However, Ashildr still has the same brain as any mortal person. It simply cannot keep a record of everything she's been through. This is another kind of concept Tregenna explores wonderfully, how Ashildr has become a bit of a husk, losing touch of her emotions because her sense of self and humanity has become so eroded and warped. She literally has to read her own diaries as if it's someone else's life, because that's how it genuinely feels to her. The visual of the floor-to-ceiling bookcases filled with diaries is a fantastic illustration of this point, a brilliant representation of the life she's lived and the years she's trudged on, you know, willingly or not. I personally feel like this is one of the most accurate portrayals of how immortality would affect someone's brain and memories. Sure, they'd experience all this stuff, but over time it would become meaningless to them. They'd become so distant and detached from it all that it may as well have happened to someone else. Part of it is also her forcibly detaching herself from all the tragedy she's experienced, like that Black Death scene shows. Ashildr mourning 3 of her dead children as she lives on, you know, cursed to outlive them no matter what.
I will endure. But no more babies.
This kind of storytelling is what that phenomenal ending scene of The Girl Who Died represented visually. How Ashildr initially started off with a sense of awe and wonder at seeing the centuries pass by, only to end up sad and angry because she's realised she's more cursed than blessed. Like the Doctor said at the end of that story, immortality isn't living forever, it's everyone else dying. You can never form meaningful connections with anyone you meet because you will always outlive them. You can only bury so many friends, lovers and children before you realise the hell your life has become.
All these people here, they're like smoke. They blow away in a moment.
The Doctor understands this feeling more than anyone else. It's something the show has played with before, even as relatively far back as School Reunion, where Ten admits he can't settle down with anyone because humans wither and die as he keeps on living. It's why the character hates endings so much, because they're a reminder of the difference in lifespans. This writing even manages to force some actual emotion out of Maisie Williams, as Ashilda begs the Doctor to get her away from this place and time so she can truly experience more.
Why not?
It's a nice through line, this desire to see more. It helps to give her villainous plan an actual justification, because she's desperate for any kind of escape no matter what. Ashilda hates the Doctor because he should have known better than to put her through this hell. Just like she says, he understands eternity more than anyone, he should be sympathetic to her plight, but instead she feels as though he abandoned her. He gave her this curse to slowly crawl through time while he flew off into the universe to do whatever he wanted.
Do you ever think or care what happens after you've flown away?
However, as justified as Ashilda is in her jealousy and resentment, the Doctor is also sympathetic and understandable here. He didn't want her to live this kind of life. He didn't have time to think about all the far-reaching consequences of his actions. He was just trying to save a young girl who died to protect her village. The Doctor was trying to do the right thing, the most Doctorish thing he could do in that given moment. It reminds me a bit of the young Davros in the series opener, where 12 chose to rescue the boy despite knowing what he would go on to become. Much like with Ashilda, the Doctor was just saving a child who needed help, and he had no way of knowing it would turn out the way it did.
I didn't know that your heart would rust because I kept it beating.
Capaldi does another fantastic job here with this speech. You really understand the regret 12 feels for trapping Ashilda within her life. It's similar to 12's eye-opening words at the end of Mummy on the Orient Express, where he explained that sometimes there isn't a good choice, but you still have to make a choice. He's an optimistic, hopeful person who truly believed immortality would be better for Ashilda rather than death, because that was his only way to save her. Even immediately after resurrecting her, the Doctor seemed to regret it. But in this episode, I respect how he stands by his decision, because it was the right thing to do in the moment, to save this person who gave so much to save her village. She died because of him, she was his collateral damage, and he felt it was his duty and responsibility to save her. The Doctor felt like he owed her that second chance at life. He just never realised it could go this badly. After a house-breaking romp, the Doctor and Ashilda find the amulet MacGuffin from the beginning, and there's a wacky and zany scene of them walking past Mr. Fanshawe, who is sleeping on the sofa for some reason. It feels really tonally disconnected considering the emotional weight of the scenes before this. Like, is the powerful moment of Ashilda asking how many companions the Doctor has lost really suited for a comedic scene of them climbing up a cramped chimney? It's complete tonal whiplash and very ill-fitting. It doesn't really match the rest of the episode's atmosphere. A more appropriate comedic sequence is the introduction of rival highwayman Sam Swift, played wonderfully by Rufus Hound. I know it's a Cinema Sins level nitpick, but was he really just sitting in this tree all day waiting for the small chance that the Nightmare would be strolling by? God knows how long he was waiting for. Anyway, this is a fun scene similar to Robot of Sherwood the year before.
No, not the puns. Line in the sand. No pun.
There's some great banter, and the comedic scene of Sam and Ashilda tussling for control feels so much more natural than the housebreaking scene before it. It's also a good way to maintain the Doctor and Ashilda's different approaches, as the latter is quick to choose violence and murder, whilst the former is more of a pacifist and chooses the peaceful diplomatic route.
Kill him and you make an enemy of me.
This moment clearly has an impact on Ashilda, albeit a brief one, because she does spare Sam. I feel like this isn't just because she remembers how 12 easily defeated the Maya. It's because she does genuinely still have goodness in her heart. It's like we see later on, with one half of Ashilda lit up but obscured by the door and the other in shadow, showing the inner conflict as she grapples with her gratitude and resentment of the Doctor. She clearly respects him regardless of her hatred of him, and she knows killing Sam in cold blood would simply be wrong and unnecessary. She has nothing to gain from killing him, and it shows that there's still a glimmer of hope for this antagonistic character. After all, where there's tears, there's hope. However, any hope is quickly dashed as Ashilda shuts the Doctor's theorising down, and we meet Leandro, who's clearly let himself go a bit after joining Arsenal. It's at this point, halfway through the episode, that all the interesting stuff goes down the drain, and we find ourselves reverting back to the status quo more than a classic rock radio station. Ashilda becomes a cackling and conniving villain, which isn't very convincing because she looks like a little kid pouting and not getting her way. Leandro's design is okay, I guess. He's far from the worst humanoid animal in the show, and he's miles better from that abomination from Orphan 55. What I really hate about this scene is how expositional it is. It's just a reverse shot sequence of the Doctor asking questions about the villain's plan, and then they answer it.
It's boring.
Oh, you don't have to tell me again. Oh, but wait, Leandro can burp fire or something, so I guess it's all forgiven. Carry on, nothing to see here, big kitty man can do a Charizard, whoop-de-doo. The moment the story introduces some big Beauty and the Beast lion man, it all goes downhill very quickly and makes it a disappointing run-of-the-mill Doctor Who story.
He has no idea what we intend to do with it.
It's the main downfall of the narrative because it feels so unnecessary. If there was ever an opportunity for a pure historical story, this would be it. Focusing on Ashilda trying to get the Doctor to take her on board the TARDIS, with the pair getting caught up in robberies and executions as they deal with the time period they're in. Ashilda's cynicism and jadedness is enough to make her villainous, like we see as the Doctor and Ashilda clash over who she is now and who the Doctor remembers her to be.
I think the alternative frightens you. That this is who I've become.
She has a genuine animosity towards him and it's hard not to understand why. After all, the Doctor was the one who gave her that gift and curse of immortality. Due to Jack being an out-and-out fan favourite protagonist, we never really got to see that from him, not even in Torchwood. But Ashilda's hatred of the Doctor is a very strong driving force of the story and it should have been the main focus of the episode. 12 is directly faced with the consequences of his own actions, the ripples he caused, and that really has all the bearings of a fantastic story, befitting of the philosophical and methodical 12th Doctor era. However, instead, the story tries making half of it a comedic buddy cop episode culminating in a giant alien invasion, which is really disappointing and generic. Due to its nature as a largely personal and character-driven narrative, The Woman Who Lived doesn't really get to explore its setting extensively. For all its flaws, The Girl Who Died made good use of its Viking-era setting, using the authentic village as a great backdrop to a story exploring elements of Norse mythology and religion. However, The Woman Who Lived, on the other hand, barely does anything with its interesting setting outside of the hanging climax, and a brief comedic scene of two incompetent guards trying to arrest the Doctor. It's a real shame because it's a period of history Doctor Who has never really touched in the show, and this was a good chance to feature the setting a bit more thoroughly, but it cuts a lot of corners and it's huge missed potential. I would admit I like Sam Swift's literal gallows humour as he tries to stall his execution with an impromptu stand-up routine, even bringing the Doctor in for a few jokes.
And his nose is so big that they'll have to widen the noose!
I think it's a nice way to humanise the character, making him more sympathetic as he stands in front of all these bloodthirsty people demanding his execution. And yes, that part is actually pretty accurate. They loved to hang him back then, and to be honest, people these days probably would too if Twitter was anything to go by. It's especially poignant when Sam is pardoned and the masses immediately turn on the Doctor instead because they came to see a hanging. It's like going to see a football match and not getting any football. So actually, basically any current Man United match then. However, Sam Swift dies anyway as Ashilda uses the Eye of Hades MacGuffin to open a portal to the Cat Dimension. Like I mentioned, this is such a boring and run-of-the-mill escalation of events. It feels so tacked on and badly integrated. This rushed villain plan complete with Leandro betraying Ashilda in the most predictable turn of events. Gee, who would have thought the creepy, fire-breathing Lion Man villain would betray his human accomplice? That kind of stuff never happens in Doctor Who. Even if you aren't going to go with a pure historical, Leandro and his kitten crew simply aren't necessary. The narrative would have still worked with the Eye of Hades thing if it was some way to restore Ashilda's mortality. Maybe she could be planning to take someone's life to restore her own in a more literal sense, rather than all this portal to escape stuff. You can still have some high stakes with maybe like a big earthquake or something to threaten the entire planet, but just remove all the Leandro alien invasion elements. It would make things a lot cleaner and focus more on the actual immortality aspects of the story, rather than a traditional monster of the week. With the Doctor's guidance, Ashilda could realise that it would be wrong to murder someone and threaten the entire world just so that she could restore her mortality. The character beats would largely remain the same, and they would probably hit a lot harder than they do with this typical alien invasion climax.
They need us!
Welcome back.
Yes, now that she has almost destroyed the planet, Ashilda suddenly has a change of heart and decides to save Sam Swift with the use of the second Maya medical kit. The Doctor had given this to her in The Girl Who Died so that she could find a companion to share her mortality with. It was his attempt at making the ability a bit less of a curse, but I feel like it also showed a bit of his naivety with humans. When you have that kind of power to grant one person immortality, you would never know who to give it to. Ashilda has had many friends and lovers over her years, but she knew she was immortal and would never want to feel like she's wasted her second dose on someone who isn't worthy, you know, like she alludes to earlier in the story. After all, how do you pick? When would you feel ready to make such a choice? How do you know who you want to spend eternity with? I like how the woman who died resolves this plot element, having Ashilda use it on Sam because it's the right thing to do. She isn't selfish with it and uses it to save the life she wrongly took. In a way, it helps her to understand why the Doctor did what he did. She can experience that sense of justice herself, going to such means to save a life because it's just kind. It's a good character resolution for Ashilda, placing her in the shoes of the man she resented and giving her the window into the impossible choices he has to make every single day. I also appreciate that the episode is a bit ambiguous when it comes to whether Sam will actually be immortal, because you know, there are too many of them walking around already. Instead, the episode has the Doctor unsure whether he'll be immortal or whether the portal used up all the resurrection energy and simply restored his life as it is. I'm sure some people would consider it a cop-out, but I think it's a suitable and thematic use of the plot thread. It matches the story the episode wanted to tell and doesn't just keep it as a "ooh, who will it be used on" teaser for expanded media. This ending also sees the Doctor and Ashilda on slightly friendlier terms, understanding why they can't travel together because they would lose touch of what matters. Capaldi gives another wonderful heartfelt speech about the beauty of mortality, and it's a fantastic piece of writing by Tregenna accompanied by an exceptional Murray Gold score.
I know how beautiful and precious life is because it's fleeting.
The Doctor needs that grounded sense of mortality to put things into perspective for himself. He needs those mayflies around him so he knows what matters, what counts. It's another good use of Sam Swift, the Doctor singling him out as a man who made every last moment matter even when he knew he would die. It's a prime example of the wonders of life, how glad Sam is to have a second chance, a constant reminder to Ashilda that she is also living a second chance, as bleak as it can often be. And then to end the touching scene, the Doctor and Ashilda vow to keep an eye on each other, becoming frenemies of sorts as illustrated by the framing of the scene. They're on opposite sides of the table, a burning flame separating them because they need to be kept apart. Otherwise, you know, people will burn as they lose their perspective on the universe. In a way, you can kind of read it as foreshadowing for them standing in the ruins of Gallifrey as the Doctor succumbs to the toxicity of his relationship with Clara. Ashilda is a key figure in that storyline, so this framing is a nice hint towards that as they leave on friendly yet still pretty tense terms. Ashilda still watching the Doctor even in the modern day, as we can see on Clara's phone. It almost sets her up as this inevitable figure lurking in the background forever, always waiting for the Doctor. It all creates a very ominous ending, especially with that fantastic tease of Clara's impending doom, as she does that thing all doomed companions seem to do.
Oh, don't worry, daft old man. I'm not going anywhere.
Unlike The Girl Who Died, The Woman Who Lived is very difficult to review. It's two very different stories awkwardly mashed up together. On one hand, it's an absolutely incredible exploration of the realities of immortality, how it wears you down and erodes your humanity. 12 and Ashilda have so many brilliant moments as they explore these themes, which are written excellently by Catherine Tregenna. However, the other half of the episode is a very average, ill-fitting alien invasion story that doesn't match at all. It creates for some very stunted viewing. The episode's plot very stop-start as it tries to juggle these two very different tones and styles. If it was a purely character-based story akin to Out of Time, The Woman Who Lived would probably be up there in the B or A ranks, but it really gets brought down by its other aspects, so you know, it can't really get higher than a C on the Series 9 tier list. It doesn't use its setting as much as I'd have liked, and Maisie Williams continues to be a flat actor, wasting Ashilda's potential with a wooden performance. The exploration of immortality really carries the episode, and as I mentioned before, I wish it could have just been that instead of the Leandro plotline, because his presence is unnecessary and prevents Sam Swift being fleshed out a bit more to really make his death and resurrection hit harder. I wish I could like The Woman Who Lived. It's a good follow-up to The Girl Who Died and builds up the wider story arc well, but it just doesn't seem to know what it wants to be and it gets lost in itself as a result. There's some nice instances of directing and scoring, but it just doesn't do enough to carve out a distinct identity or make a mark, so it shares the low point of the series with its predecessor. But what do you think of The Woman Who Lived? Was I too harsh? Was I not harsh enough? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye. And a special thank you to my Asbantium level patrons Fallon Cortez and Nathan Gibson, my Diamond level patron Glenna Clark, my Platinum level patrons Maximilian Foreman and Nick's Games, and all my Gold level patrons Boots, Daniel Shiletto, Discretio, Franz Horn aka Line Vortex, Robert Hock, Scarlett Hayes, and Tom Azar. Thank you so much for your support.